Hello,
Okay.
welcome to the listening, Joshua Donaldson. So, where are you today?
Um, so Tim, I currently live with my family in Surrey, in sort of a part of Surrey called Tadworth. It's been a recent thing moving back here. Moved back here in September. I was living in southeast London for the last 5 years, but so yeah, back here. Work disappeared, and I find myself in a very fortunate position to be able to have a family to go back to support me while I'm sort of getting back on my feet, really. Yeah.
So, that was in part because of the crazy times we're in, I guess.
It wasn't actually. I
Okay.
was the living arrangement I had in London, which was really serving me very well. It just I'd felt for a while that it was time for a change. Yeah, I think with lockdown happening, it kind of presented like an opportunity for change, and like so much happened for so many people, I guess, on a personal level, losing jobs and changing lifestyles, and losing security, and so I ended up kind of I actually ended up um, finding some work, and I was in a really good place work-wise, actually, having had the first half of the lockdown, kind of sort of 3 or 4 months of losing all my sort of work. Suddenly, I got some work, but then I actually said, you know what, I'm gonna go back, have a period of time back with my folks, my sister, who I love, and we have a good relationship. We really support each other and get on, so it's lovely. And so I went back there as a temporary kind of place of transition, just to kind of ground myself, and to plan the next kind of move, and also allow things to kind of settle down and kind of reopen again, and work's starting to flow a bit more. So I'm starting to feel like I have some support to be able to maybe consider moving to my next bit.
So, is this the house that you grew up in as a kid then?
Pretty much. I moved here when I was about 5 years old,
Okay.
and so it's kind of entrenched in our kind of steeped in this family kind of energy, and a very safe, surrounded kind of rural part of Surrey. This bedroom has been this was my bedroom as a child, and it's changed a bit, but it's just there's this real sense of home here, and I feel very lucky to have that, and I thank I thank it, every day. Just south facing, get the sun in, and it's just a quiet spot, and I feel very lucky to have this like sense of kind of home. If as and when things kind of, if I feel like I need to be here and I feel welcome here, and have that relationship with my folks and my sister and my brother. It's they're thinking of moving on at some point in the near future, so that'll be interesting to we've got so many dead pets buried in the garden and that kind of stuff. There's so much.
Are they thinking of leaving the area then as well, or just moving somewhere nearby?
There's for a long time now that my family have spoken of kind of moving sort of maybe more West Country, or more to Dorset. We've got like kind of affiliation with Dorset. Got family there, and we spent a lot of time there over the years, and so there's this kind of pull to kind of be closer to the sea and to be further away from the craziness of London, which is very much on our doorstep, essentially.
So you very much feel the influence of London where you are then?
Um, yes and no. I mean, it's far enough removed. I mean, we're very lucky to be in this kind of spot where you can feel like we're away from it. It is quiet. There are, you know, Gatwick Airport is about 20 minutes away, but still, it's quiet. The M25 is like a stone's throw away, and we're just far away enough to kind of not have it in our face. But there's this kind of we've interestingly noticed over the last year or two, like this, you can hear the traffic getting louder. And we're like, is there just more cars? Is it just getting busier? And so there are these kind of, we can sense that it's near, but so it's accessible. But yeah, the pool is to kind of be further away from that, and to just be really in nature, and to be quiet, be in a quiet space that's really rural, and that we can just, you know, be away from that hustle and bustle. And I'm speaking for them really, because, you know, I'm probably going to end up being in a near enough a city centre, not necessarily London, but for work purposes, I'll have to be around these kind of places.
So I was going to say, so are you kind of drawn more to the city at this point in your life then? What's your relationship with city and country in that sense?
Yeah, I don't. It's been a funny one. I'm not a big city person. I never had an intention to live in London. Like, I moved there because all my friends kind of moved there, and I felt like, why not? So let's go give it a go. And London is great. You know, I do really enjoy it, but I am aware that I don't feel like I need to be there. And actually, there's a lot that I seek that I don't have to be there for. And I do have this real, like a need for more quiet and a slower pace. And but it's usually the thing that kind of I like about cities and London and Bristol, you know, is the kind of the culture and the art, the music, that kind of part of that I need that kind of inspiration for my work and my creative outlets. And so yeah, but I never intended to stay in London, and I kind of did. And like everything, you kind of, you set up shop, and you kind of end up your work and your ties and your friends there. And but I was very fortunate enough to my living situation for the most part of living there was in a really awesome little house, big house, in a kind of community kind of oriented household, cooperative kind of house share. So that was very cool, and it felt like a very different, what maybe would be a slightly alternative way of living in London than maybe say most people.
Do you think this is something that's happening more because it's obviously more affordable for people, and, you know, work and income is pretty scarce for a lot of people, and the expense of being in London just seems to keep increasing? So do you think, in your experience, is this something that's kind of popping up everywhere, or was it just something that you in particular were doing? Or
I think I definitely see a need for more of these kinds of homes, places of refuge for people, or and I do see that there, you know, I see groups like these kind of alternative community housing groups, more of the people kind of like wanting to do that kind of way of life and live a little bit more connectedly and intentionally.
so not necessarily for economic reasons solely, but actually because people want to live in community.
I think so. I think, yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, you know, I feel like that's something that we need more of. And I think you know, we had so many guests come over to our house, and everybody who came was just like, wow, this is cool. You know, it was kind of quite alien for people to be like, so you all live together and you all like get together and have a meeting like once a month, and you kind of, you like have this kind of vision, and you share the garden, you all do, you know, have this sense of cooperation. I think, yeah, and so most people were really kind of like, and it's a beautiful idea, and we're kind of really warmed to it, and I guess, and I felt that there was like a sense of kind of longing for something more than just a living in a house share with people that you might not necessarily, basically just maybe feeling a sense of loneliness in that situation, in those kinds of situations, and having some, you know, shared meals every day, and sharing, having a system of like food, and, you know, or organizing all that stuff, and, you know, just giving it more thought and space and time, rather than just kind of like rushing in and doing that thing and then disappearing. And
so less of a sort of secondary consideration, which it might be for a lot of people, where they're doing something in London and they need somewhere to live, where this is like making your domestic situation a bit more of a central part of your life. Or
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I think just having what that experience was for me was like feeling like I had a family away from family.
Mm.
It felt a bit more like that. I felt like, I don't know whether that was just because the people I was living with directly were very lovely and very compassionate, and you know, if I was ill, I had people checking on me and bringing me things to, like, you know, food, and we always made sure everyone had food left for them if they weren't around, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, that kind of, so it felt family, and it felt like that kind of, and I guess that was one of the kind of, for some of the people in that place, it was kind of one of those, part of that vision was to create a kind of a caring sort of organism, you know, of care and sharing, and support for one another in, I guess, quite a crazy city that kind of, you might not necessarily get that kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like there's a lot to be said for that way of being in a city, because I mean, you often think of, or I at least think of, when I hear about communities or conscious communities, as people living in the countryside somewhere, you know, with a bit of land. And but it seems like a really good strategy for, you know, if you're not married with kids, or at that stage in your life, if you're just kind of at the beginning, or even if you're not, but you're in the city and you don't have the family there, or, you know, that kind of network of support. It seems like a really good way of making you more secure, more grounded, more healthy emotionally, maybe, you know, to have that sort of support network in the place where you live, to face the city. Because it, you know, everyone who's lived in London knows it's an intense place to be. You know, it's a stressful, no matter what you're doing work wise, it's stressful just being there. You know, there's so much energy, and
Yeah,
there's so much kind of information coming in all the time, that having something a bit more wholesome than just drink or drugs or whatever it is that you're using to kind of get over the fire in London, which a lot of people deal with it that way, you know. Yeah, it sounds like a good way, and I wonder if we won't see more of that going on in cities as the sort of years unfold now. I don't know. There does seem to be a kind of exploration into community again going on in people's minds, or in actual practical experience, you know. And it does keep coming up. It's one of the things for me that I think is really showing as a weakness in our culture is we became so individuated, and community, which held on, through the Industrial Revolution, which probably was the beginning of the end of community properly, in our country at least.
Mm.
It seems like it held on for so long, but it's been slowly eroded. And we have a sort of weird new form of community online, which is very indistinct and maybe not, quite a bit superficial and perhaps a little bit toxic even in a lot of senses. So I feel like there is a kind of desire for something more wholesome that's sort of generally bubbling up, and the dysfunction of this nuclear family model, which works for some people, but for lots of people it really doesn't work, and especially when children come along, it can be quite isolating. So we're in a very, in many ways, we're in a time of massive change, and one of the things that seems to be at the heart of what we need to work out is how to live together, with all these kind of weird ways we relate online and physically, and if we're in the city or in the country. And it's always interesting to see what's being explored on the edges, because I guess that's where new cultures and ways of being always emerge, at least to begin with, in sort of more experimental places. So you were in London, and you talked about a little bit about sort of creative work and tell us a bit about what you are actually doing work-wise creatively, or what's going on in that universe for you at the moment.
Yeah, so I have kind of two ventures really. My main kind of, I spend most of my time doing, I make a living as a videographer and a filmmaker, camera man and video editor. So I do a bunch of that kind of stuff. I have I started a brand called ConsciousFilmCo, which is how I operate under that name. And the intention originally was to kind of align my my kind of personal values and ethical values, and kind of my interests in change, activism and stuff. I was trying to align that with my job essentially, because when I first started, I went to film school, and then after I graduated, I spewed out into the world, and I was a runner on commercials in advertising, and it just it kind of broke me I ended up, I was in that world for about a year, 2 years, and then I kind of just couldn't handle it anymore, and it was actually it kind of catalyzed, I guess, a lot of my awakening to a lot of just how fucked up that kind of industry is really, and how just a lot of I found it very destructive and degenerative and suddenly and wasteful, and there was very little my experience of it personally, and I guess it's because it was very that world is very hierarchical, and because I was right on the bottom of that ladder, I kind of experienced just a lot of not unfriendliness, and it was really ruthless, very very kind of not pleasant, really pleasant environment to work in. There were some great moments and great times and great jobs, but on the whole, I felt like I was like, this is not helping. I felt like this wasn't right. It just didn't feel right. I didn't feel I was responsible as well for kind of helping run these productions, and saw lots of food waste and like material waste, like fresh timber just getting like chucked in a skip that had just been used to build a set for like some advert. And it was just like, it was just painful to experience. And I found myself getting very unhappy about it. And so I left that kind of environment, work environment. And I mean, usually I stepped away from filmmaking and that kind of being part of that crew, that kind of world, because it kind of sucked my soul. It's dry, and I was just like, maybe filmmaking isn't for me. Maybe I don't want to be in this, and I kind of was in a bit of a kind of state for a while, just kind of because I devoted this 3 years to like studying it, and I loved it, and I met this amazing group of friends and this community of my peers and we're still very close. And suddenly the real world of filmmaking to me, from my experience, was just awful. And I was like, so I took some time away from it, and then it was only about 4-5 years ago that I kind of started to revisit that world again, but actually instead of being part of the working in those big productions, I was like, I'm going to do it myself, and I'm going to buy my own toolkit essentially, and go out and just try and start doing it, and actually do and work for organizations and people who kind of see eye to eye with me, because that's what I felt very alone in that world. I felt like, wow, I just felt like, it felt like I was like an alien, or I felt very lonely, and like I didn't share anything in common with the people in that industry. So I'm probably very wrong, but that was my limited.
So you'd sort of rejected the whole thing, but then realised that actually there was an essential part of you that was a filmmaker. It's just that way of doing it wasn't the right way for you. And so you wanted to then explore the possibility of a different way of doing it that would be more aligned with your values or who you felt you were.
Part of, but then also, so my other venture is as I'm a songwriter and a musician, and that's kind of my soul dance. The video thing is my survival dance, as much as I love it as well. It's but that's kind of how it's there's a lot more money in video, and I can whereas the music industry is just a bit fucked. It's a bit diabolical, and you can still make money doing it, but it's very challenging these days. Nobody wants to pay for music anymore. So
I mean, it was already pretty hard to be a musician in the old days when you got fucked by everybody, but there was a way if you kind of succeeded to make it. But now it seems really difficult with, as you say, nobody wants to pay for it anymore. Everyone wants it, and if they do pay, say Spotify, it's just a new way of siphoning off what money there is. And it's not the musicians who are getting it, or, unless they're huge names. I always thought we'd get around that, and it seemed like the internet would be had this great potential to liberate some of that kind of dysfunction and kind of get rid, or not liberate dysfunction, but get rid of the dysfunction and liberate the potential for anyone who's got some music out there to actually make something from it. And maybe that will come about, once we get over this phase of massive commercialization of the internet, and if we can kind of somehow prize it out of the hands of the corporations again, and let it be what it wants to be, which is this incredible free exchange of information, but find ways to support people in that. So that's interesting. So it's the music you feel is more deeply your soul your soul dance, as you call it.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, that's always, since I was young, you know, I'd always wanted to pursue that. And um, I think there's been like a big therapeutic journey with kind of doing that, and being things with, like, you know, I basically, I've been wanting to do it for a decade, and I didn't, even though I had the potential to, you know, as we all do, but I couldn't for whatever reason. You know, it was fear of being seen, you know, laziness, not actually feeling like I was good enough. Yeah, just so many things. And it was only, you know, a few years ago that I kind of was like, wow, I'm nearly 30, and I need to, like, I haven't done the thing that I wanted to do since I was 16. I haven't shared it, you know, I was doing it, but I hadn't shared it in the way that I felt like I wanted to share. And so I just started to try and do that, and finish things. You know, I had so many unfinished bits of music and songs. That was another big hurdle, was just like never feeling like I had this thing with, like, I still do, you know, I struggle with articulating myself in a way, expressing myself and my ideas verbally, and lyrically, poetically, in the way that I feel like I want to. And so that's been an interesting. So yeah, this all of this that there was kind of has kind of amalgamated into this kind of therapeutic healing journey, where I find myself now about to release my first EP. And I met.
So when you say therapeutic, you mean that it's therapeutic in that you were denying this part of yourself, and now you're kind of allowing it to happen, or you're, because there's sort of, seems like there's two parts which are both interesting, and I'd like to sort of get into both of them. One part is your relationship with music, and what it is about music that fascinates you, or that you love, or that compels you to do it. And then the other is this relationship with the world, which is something that fascinates me right now, because this is something I've struggled with my whole life, and I'm still, you know, just your there's plenty of time, let me tell you, because I'm about to finally, after many years, you know, face the world with my creativity, because I've been hiding it away, really. But yeah, so those two areas. So first, I'd like to kind of get into music, and your very personal relationship with music. What is it? Maybe talk about your first earliest experiences of it, or what got you into it, what it is about it, how you experience it, all of that.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's so I just wanted to say something from what you
Yeah.
just said. Actually, was actually like, I totally agree. And it's this kind of idea that we have to, because we're going to be creating for the rest of our lives, probably, most likely. You know, we're not just going to stop doing those things that our soul is kind of calling for and we love to do. It's kind of we're just driven naturally to do that. So it's this funny. I find it funny, this kind of, it's like this kind of this clock that we've got to do things before this certain time, otherwise we're just, you know, what's that about? I don't. But anyway, so yeah, I first kind of experiences with having this kind of a deeply passionate relationship with music were just listening to artists. And yeah, I guess it was really when I was maybe in early secondary school kind of years, like kind of 12, 13 years old, and would kind of my brother was a big influence musically to me, my older brother, and I would just listen to the sort of stuff that he was listening to, and like punk rock and kind of emo stuff. But like I ended up kind of gravitating towards this kind of more melancholic styles of music, and that seemed to kind of turn me on. And it's kind of the flick, these lights would come on, and I'd have these. Yeah, I remember just like listening on the bus to school, just like an album, a favorite album, and just being like moved so profoundly by this music. And obviously, I was probably so young, quite, yeah, too young to really kind of understand. Like, I just knew that this felt good, and it felt good to feel a lot about. And the feelings that this music was evoking in me was like a new thing at that time. And I was like, wow, this is really powerful. And I get a lot out of this, and I'm moved to tears, and I'm kind of moved to joy, and it's kind of like this soundtrack to my life, you know. It kind of felt like, and I guess I just, from having those experiences, I was like, I want to do that. I want to try and, because it kind of suggested that there was this kind of, I was connecting with that emotionally, and that was in me, and I wanted to kind of express that in my own way through a kind of a similar medium.
This is so interesting, because it's as if you're describing my kind of teenage years as well.
Oh,
because
what was it like for you, Tim?
would it just in exactly the same way? You know, I was lucky in that my parents always were playing music. They were quite into music. My dad was a massive Bob Dylan fan. So, I mean, what a great kind of in that was, you know, to be exposed to Dylan even before I knew anything about it. I didn't really pick up or notice that music until a bit later. That was more like my late teens, but it was there. And the Beatles were such a huge part of my childhood. And we used to, as kids, we would always be playing their records and listen. You know, I must have played the entire Beatles songbook, you know, about 10 times each song as a kid, and soaked it all up. And there's so much, I mean, of course, at the time you don't know it, but musically, and, you know, the spectrum of what the Beatles did in that 10 years or whatever it was is immense. So there was all of that. But then my own music, my first music that I could say was my own, that I responded to. And I grew up, you know, in sort of 70s and 80s. So Top of the Pops was a big thing. Every week, Thursday night, you know, you'd see whatever was going on, and that was almost like a religion in our house. We'd all sit down and watch it. And I think the first record that I ever bought was Ant Music by Adam and the Ants, which was Adam Ant and that band were so unlike anything else at that time. And there was something artistically and aesthetically, I guess, that I was totally attracted to with Adam and the Ants. But also at the same time, musically, there were two bands that I absolutely loved, which were The Jam and The Police. And that, the craft, you know, musically, the craft of those two bands, interestingly, both three-piece bands, but incredible musicians, brilliant pop music, you know, but with energy and with a bit of kind of, especially The Jam, that sort of edginess and that anger, or that more kind of masculine, youthful energy. But I was so moved by music, and I would, like you said, this kind of idea of it being the soundtrack, but it was so emotional for me, music. It was like a whole universe opened up that I wasn't really accessing until music kind of stirred it in me. And then, and this is something now in hindsight, I wonder if it wasn't a bit unhealthy when you talk about your emo phase, which was a kind of, even the word came in, that was something that came in later. But when I was a teenager, me and a very few friends at our school were into a band called the Smiths, Morrissey's band. And that music, and it was particularly Manchester music, because that's where they were from and that's where I grew up. And it was so our music, and there was something so moving about that music, and it was very emotional. the sensitivity of Morrissey was something I clearly recognized in myself, because I responded so strongly to it. And it was almost like a religion, you know, it was almost, people who followed the Smiths were kind of like devout followers in a way. And there was something of the rebel and the kind of contrarian, because it was widely derided by most people, and you know, it was certainly wasn't mainstream. But yeah, I just remember the depth of that emotional connection. Now, though, I look back on it and I think maybe it wasn't that healthy. For it's so romantic, and there's a sort of slightly negative, self-destructive. You know, there's something a bit dark about it that I'm not so kind of comfortable with now that I'm older. But it was this. It was a wicked mix of deeply sensitive, emotional, artistic, authentic, this is a big part, music, mixed with craftsmanship, like Johnny Marr playing the guitar, fantastic musician, and the rest of the band, you know, a great set of musicians. So that combination of craft and art and sensitivity and emotion, that's what sucked me into music. So I totally get it. When you talk, I can, you know, I recognize that journey. So carry on. So this kind of pulled you into it then.
Yeah, so I guess that was kind of that they were the first kind of signs of this might be something that I'd like to do myself, and then yeah, throughout secondary school I picked up a guitar, and I had a couple of lessons with a terrible guitar teacher, and then he just would spend our guitar lessons just playing himself. he just noodle away, and I would just be like, okay, it's so strange when I look back on it, but it was a great part of the journey. But I ended up just sort of listening to songs, and I developed quite a good ear for music, and would start to just teach myself and learn how to do like power chords on a guitar from my brother, and just learn a few of the songs that we listened to, and that was kind of, and then gradually that over the years just kind of developed into trying to write your own bits and pieces. And then yeah, it wasn't until maybe I was in my early 20s that I started to write my own songs and my own bits of music, and try to like record them in like a demo way, and yeah, and so it definitely, since I was like 18, 16, 17, 18, there was this kind of real like, I want to do this. I want to meet a bunch of guys or girls and just form a band. You know, I want to be in a band with a bunch of people, and I want us to all share this kind of passion and vision and work on a project together, and just fucking go for it, you know, and just and try to channel this stuff, and you know, and work on that, and make great music, you know, and record it. Mainly was just to put it out and then share it with people, and yeah, and play gigs and stuff. And that was kind of, so I had that kind of this real want to do that. And then like, yeah, I was never ever in, throughout my life, I never was in like in a situation where I met other musicians. Quite weirdly, like in college, I was part of someone's band. That was another thing. Me and my brother and our friend, we started a band, and that was great, but it just never went anywhere. But it was kind of like, yeah, the stuff that I wanted to do of my own, and my own writing and my own creative work was kind of, yeah, I never ended up sort of finding the other pieces of that puzzle to kind of to make it fit and make it work, and so I always found that quite frustrating. Like yeah, was
that because it was that you didn't find the people, or was there something in you that maybe just wanted it to be you, like a solo project, basically? What do you think?
I don't know, Tim. I think because, you know, if you want something enough, you'd make it happen, right? And so that, I think this was kind of when I sort of go back to the kind of, I would get quite depressed and upset that this kind of every time I tried to attempt to kind of, I would put adverts out and I would search on the internet for people, and I would, you know, when I was at film school, you know, I was just looking for people, and yeah, just those environments that I thought like I would meet like a group of people to do this with. It just never seemed to happen. It was quite interesting. But again, I wonder, was it because I wasn't prepared, or to really go for it enough, or was I not? Yeah, was I being lazy with it? Was I, you know, was I waiting for it to come to me? Was I don't know. And yeah, and yeah, it ultimately has led me to kind of go, right, let's fucking do it. You're gonna have to do it yourself, because this doesn't sound like doesn't feel like it's just gonna kind of happen. And you've kind of yeah, like
Maybe you have to do it first, and then if those people are there, they'll find you because you've already put it out there in some way.
well,
It's
that's
funny because I my experience was very different, because I think we were about 16 or 17, and there were four friends, me included, who we were all into sort of similar music. So we just, you know, we loved the music, and we were going to gigs and things at that point. We started going to see bands in Manchester, and we just decided, right, we're going to be in a band. None of us played an instrument, but we basically just got our instruments, got together, and started learning to play like that, you know, from zero. You know, and we were awful, obviously, to begin with, because we did, you know, it was like, I can play one chord, or I can't even play one chord, you know, and I played the guitar. There were two of us on guitar, and there was, well, bass guitar, two guitars, and a drummer. And we just stuck at it. And, you know, sure enough, after not very long, really, we could play stuff. And, you know, we did some covers, and we just rehearsed. Like, we had regular rehearsal space under a pub, in a basement of a pub or something it was at first. And we just played and played and played. And I can remember it probably took about a year or 2 years. But after that time, we already started writing our own songs. You know, that was something that came very naturally, the desire to create our own music rather than playing somebody else's. Even if it was really simple and it wasn't technically advanced, it was just that desire. Well, we want to, you know, express our own thing.
mm,
And some of the most beautiful moments I've ever experienced in music were some of those times when we were just rehearsing or playing together, and it clicked, and everybody got in on it and was right there together. And it was a feeling, and you would see it in people's faces. Everyone would be looking at each other and sort of smiling, and it would just happen. And it was the most wonderful thing to feel that connection through the music in the moment with those other people.
mm,
And, you know, it didn't matter that nobody else was there. And I guess, you know, with sort of more successful bands or great bands, they have those moments in front of a huge audience, and then everybody feels it, and it's incredible. But I can just remember that the highlight for me of that period was just that feeling of, we're all right on this in this moment. And it was such a joyful feeling. It was such a full, complete feeling. And you know, and our band kind of didn't amount to anything. We had a few gigs, you know, supporting people in Manchester, but we didn't really have a strong enough sound, or, you know, we always struggled to find a singer, and the one of the other guys was doing the singing, but he was almost quite reluctant to do it, really. And
mm,
it and then our kind of lives went separate ways. I got into art and went to art college, and people went to various things and did various things, and it kind of came to an end. But it was such a beautiful thing to experience. And now I'm realizing, God, that was actually a really important part of it, was the relationship with other musicians and playing together. And I kind of sort of lost touch with playing anyway for quite a while. And it's only been really in the last few years that I've picked up the guitar again, and I've got a piano here now, and I've started playing around with the piano. And for the first time, just like a year or 2 years ago, I started singing and playing. And that thing of doing two different things at once, that's been a wonderful revelation. And I've had something of that feeling from that. And the most incredible thing is that my youngest daughter, who's 8, she seems to be quite musical, and she's started learning the piano. And we've been playing some stuff together, and I've suddenly realized, oh my God, I can get that feeling again with my own daughter when she's a bit older. And so this kind of whole new universe is just beginning to open up. But I wonder, what are your experiences of that kind of? Have you had any of those experiences then, when you were sort of playing with other people?
Yeah, I get hearing you talk about that. It just brings back these memories of being in this band with my brother and our friend, and it was yeah, it was this kind of crazy math rock project that we were doing, but it was wicked, and I was playing drums in it, and it was just like, it's just exactly that, you know. It was this feeling of this unity, and this kind of something was just like, it just worked, and it was like, wow, we just created something together, and it's just like, we're all kind of on this same page right now, and it's kind of just like, yeah, it's quite like a spiritual kind of experience, really. It's kind of like, you can't really put your finger on it. It's kind of like, it's just magic, you know. And I guess that's kind of what I was really seeking for in my own project later down the line. And I was like, I know this is possible. And I've seen, I was a tour manager for a 3-piece rock band for like a year, and witnessing these 3 guys who were like best friends, and they lived together, and they all had like a job, but they would all come home, and it would be like the band was like the main thing, right? And they went off to do really well after I'd kind of left, and they're incredible musicians, and I really like admired them. But I was just like, and so I was on a daily, when we were on these tours and stuff, and I was working with them, I was witnessing these moments all the time, and just being like, oh man, I want that so much. And and seeing it kind of work in a way where, yeah, seeing that focus and dedication, and this kind of gelling, and these amazing ideas, and they recorded a couple of albums, and got quite a big following, and yeah, it was wonderful. And I found myself really being quite envious, and just I'm wondering why that hadn't happened. Why hadn't I been? Was it just not being in the right place at the right time with the right people, or because I was putting effort into trying to find that kind of group, and get. I never wanted to do it all on my own. I never wanted to. I'm somebody who kind of struggles with. I've developed a sense of a self-discipline with my work, and being self-employed and all that stuff, and now I've kind of, having been doing this music project myself for the last few years, I've kind of I can't help but feel like it feels more artificial doing it this way, is a good way to explain it. Whereas being in that group and having things and writing things together, and it organically kind of coming together, and it felt more organic, and it felt like it just naturally kind of evolved out of that kind of environment. Whereas I feel like I'm writing songs, and it's cool, but it's very two-dimensional. Like it's kind of, it's missing like this other element that kind of,
You don't have the dialogue. You don't have that creative dialogue, or the sort of feedback loop, or the kind of the other perspective when you're stuck in a corner. Because if you're on your own, you can't see when you got stuck, or when you're there and it's not working, whereas someone else can immediately just like shift it
Yeah.
a bit and it can go quite smoothly. And I wonder, as we're talking, I'm wondering if this doesn't relate to that whole thing about community, and that is what we're experiencing in those moments, this sense of belonging and of being part of something greater than ourselves, which is kind of transcendent in some way. Isn't that what we're seeking all the time, maybe? And these are little glimpses of it, and I think because our whole relationship with art is quite weird. It's very much this separation, like you have the artist and the audience, and there's this weird, unequal, distant relationship, which to me seems really unhealthy, because the origins of it are we're all doing it together. We're all dancing, we're all drumming. It's the full moon, whatever it is, the fire's blazing. Maybe we've all had some mushrooms, whatever it is, but everybody's there and they're connected. And that feeling is the feeling that we're talking about. And these are like little glimpses of it that we're all maybe trying to find a way to. And I think your instinct is right, that you're probably not going to get that on your own. Really, that perhaps, though, as you're talking, I'm thinking maybe it's a partnership would be really powerful for you rather than a whole band. Maybe a more intense one-on-one, creative, somebody who's got a load of kind of skills or things that you haven't got, that you admire, and vice versa. Maybe even a gender thing, like a female, male, something that kind of offsets it, or someone whose kind of personality is quite different. I don't know. It's just kind of what rises up as we're talking.
Definitely. I interestingly enough, as you say that, it's a very recent development in this project is that I've been I've been building the band. The band's starting to happen now. It's not happened in that dreamlike way that I kind of fantasized about, but it's at the moment it's kind of more like trying to find people to play the songs that I've written in a kind of session band kind of like way. But at the same time, I want to make it sustainable, and I want the energy of other people, and so it's kind of it's very early stages. We're still, because it's been so difficult trying to get together with other people in a room recently, and so it's kind of I'm really looking forward to this new development in the project, and we're having these other people, and one person in particular who it feels like I'm working in their music project, and we've got this kind of beautiful response, like shared kind of interest. Most importantly, was another thing I wanted to say was on what you were saying about that kind of feeling of being together and community, and it's this kind of shared vision, trying to share being with people, creating work with people who just totally get it. They totally see where you're coming from, and they see very like eye to eye, and maybe share the same interests, the same tastes in music. They listen to the same kind of, they experience the world in a kind of similar way, and so they understand that sensitivity that you're trying to bring to it, and that's a beautiful thing. And that can also, like you say, just happen in maybe a partnership, with one other person. But there's a collaboration where there's and you might not meet eye to eye on everything, right? That's
no, but you don't have to explain yourself. They just get who you are, and it takes all of that away, and then you can get right onto the business of creating and connecting, and it's those moments where the kind of boundary between people disappears a bit, and it's this multi-headed person that's doing something, or that's it. That feeling of that's really what the feeling is. It's this blending of identity, or the loosening of identity, so you kind of stop being you in a way, and you just start all being this shared consciousness that's experiencing something that's going on. and the act of creation is such a great place, or maybe that is, it's synonymous with that experience. Maybe when everybody does kind of meet in that way, it can't help but be a creative act, because the two things are the same. I don't know, but it does seem like doing something that's creative is a very powerful way of enabling this kind of connection. Music in particular, because there's something about that vibrational thing it's physical, isn't it? It's physical and emotional and intellectual. It's a whole form experience, I guess, and it may be more than most art forms. It's, when you're there with live music playing, it's in your body. You become part of it. You become an instrument. You're sort of vibrating with the sound of it. Yeah.
I think that was I remember the reason I wanted to go to film school and to learn how to make films. What got me into that was actually the musical aspect of it, as combined with the visual aspect and the narrative. It was this kind of amalgamation, this kind of collection of like mediums coming together and just explode in like an explosion of just managed being able to evoke so much more than maybe those elements on their own. I remember watching, discovering cinema, essentially, like watching Babel by Alejandro Irinatu and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. That film, it blew my mind, and the soundtrack, and the way that the characters and the cinematography, the light, the way that and it was just those experiences were that got me into that, doing that stuff. But I that kind of such a powerful medium.
There's something about that combination, isn't there? Those sequences in films where there's music and something's going on, obviously, but it's visual as well. And that kind of, it reminds me of those experiences, the soundtrack experiences you talked about earlier, when you'd maybe have your headphones in and you've got the music playing, and then you're in the world, and suddenly walking around the supermarket is transformed into this great work of art, or I don't know, you're just walking down the street and the sort of drama and the richness of life suddenly becomes more real, more present, because the music is kind of infiltrating it. I can remember there's a really good film. It's a very English film, and it's set in Blackpool, which is in the northwest, which is a place I know very well because we used to go there as kids, because my grandparents lived just down the coast from it. And there's a great film called Funny Bones, which is set there. Really unusual. Have you seen that film?
I've heard of it. I haven't.
It's got what's the comedian called? He's a real physical comedian. He's almost like from a different era. Shit, his name's gone.
What year?
It'll come back to me. It's like, it must be made in the late 80s, early 90s maybe. And I think the director might be Peter Chisholm or something like that. It's a very English film, and it's funny, but it's got this incredible vaudeville sort of vibe. But there's a moment, there are a few moments where they play music, like the soundtrack is brilliant. They play some great jazz tracks where there's these two old guys who are brothers, who are mime artists, who kind of work on the funfair, but they've got these kind of really old theatrical skills. And there's just a few sequences with them where you've got incredible music playing, and there's an amazing like blues track that's playing, and you're just seeing people in Blackpool walking around doing their thing. And I think it's sort of set in the 60s or something, and it's incredible, the combination of the sound and the visuals and the place, and if you know it as well. And I can remember sort of almost as a result of that, playing some music when I was up there and I was driving through Blackpool and seeing how it transformed everything. And you can do that anywhere. You know, you can turn your life into a cinematography, a cinematic experience just by putting some music on. You know.
Totally, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's very powerful. I've had I had a couple of experiences of scoring music to some film.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe it's soundtracks, you know, as well for you, because that combination of the art forms, you know. So tell us about that.
I would love to. Ultimately, I mean, one day it would be wonderful to like. I think my heart is really in writing songs and trying to channel that, and that maybe someday down the line, a filmmaker might want, based upon my own music, because I've had experiences of people wanting me to write music for films, but in a style that is just totally not my thing. And I'd like to be, picked up for, maybe somebody wants some music like the music that I write, and then I would be like super up for that. That'd be great. But yeah, a couple of positive experiences of writing music for pictures was, it's fascinating because you and I was given, in a couple of these situations, I was given quite sort of lenient creative control and really like allowed to kind of assess like what was going on and the texture and the feel of the film and what's happening, and kind of go with it and try and create and try and enhance what was happening. And you can just absolutely make or break. You can change. Like there is so much power in the music in film. It's incredible, and I've really enjoyed that process of
You're highlighting something really interesting that I want to point out, which is, and this is something I've seen so many times. It's one of the biggest mistakes that gets made regularly. If you're commissioning or involving a creative of some sort, an artist of some sort, on a project, always find someone whose work you love and then give them the brief and let them go free.
Yeah.
Whenever something hasn't worked, it's been because somebody has decided, I want it to be like this, and then they try and find someone to fit their vision of it. And it never works. You have to give up the control. There's no point getting an artist in and then trying to control them or micromanage them or tell them what to do. It doesn't work like that. What you need to do is get them in, choose the person that you love their work first of all, and then just tell them this is what it is. Let them go wherever they want to go, and they'll do something completely surprising, you know, probably. But they'll certainly, if they're really doing the thing that they want to do, that's the only thing that's going to have any value, really. And it's a massive mistake that gets made again and again with designers, artists, whoever you're sort of involving creatively in a project. That's the way to relate to a creative person. Just give them the brief and let them go, or let them free, because that's how they'll work well. Yeah. Sorry, that was a little rant. I've just seen it so many times, and I've been in that situation where somebody's trying to force, or they're kind of editing what you're doing, and you're just like, this is shit. Why are you doing this? Let me do it. I know what I'm doing. Let me do it, you know, or get somebody else, you know.
Yeah, you know, to be, if you like my work, then let me do it, you know, and that's, you know, absolutely. It makes perfect sense.
And there's that relationship, you know, so if a great director works with a great actor or with a great sort of soundtrack artist, and they have that relationship, they will feed off each other, you know. Then you start getting inspired by the people you're working with, and it changes what you're doing. So maybe you change the way you shoot the film, maybe you change the way you write the film because of the music, or you know, or the other way around. That's how it works for sure. It's a collaborative act, you know, I think, when it's at its best. when it
Yeah.
succeeds.
It's a, there's always, I've learned doing like film and music, you know, there's always compromise, you know, when you're working with people, that's just naturally, especially in filmmaking, you know, if you write a film and you get somebody to direct it, you know, there's, you're coming, you know, there's naturally that, and that, yeah, I speak, and you know, a lot of my filmmaker friends, and you know, it's there's a big part of letting go in a way, maybe in some situations, but I'm sure there are situations where people, you know, see a project through and get it how they want it, you know. But this collaborative approach, I feel like, you know, it's, let it, yeah, like you say, it's like just let it be, let it grow, let it be like this, let it have this organic, evolving process, and try not to, yeah, don't force things, don't try to make things away, you know, and naturally within that process there's compromise, and maybe you let go of certain ideas and allow space for other ideas to come in that are, you know, probably going to be like way better in a way, you know, and that's kind of,
Yeah, it's a lightness of touch, because I don't know, I don't like the word compromise, because that to me sounds like you feel like the thing that's being done is not as good as what
yeah,
it could be. I think, and that does happen, and then nobody's happy. It feels more like it's that sense of lightness where you've got your own ego in control, and you can recognize when somebody else has got something better to bring to it, and if you can allow that in, when, you know, if you can give up some of the authority or control or ownership of what's going on enough that, I mean, that's when it seems to work the best, when you have a group of people that get together and they all get to put in who they are, and in that mix something bigger than all of them comes out that they could never have done on their own. And perhaps a lot of the sort of pain and struggle and people falling out and all of that is because egos think, no, I'm this band, you know, without me it's nothing, or, and that's when all the cracks appear. You know, and people, partly perhaps because of the industry, like particularly in the music industry, or anything where you become famous and then you get pumped by all these people around you who are just sort of telling you good things about yourself. You start to believe it, you know, that trap. You know, that's the mistake that can be made. But I think the best artists are the ones that recognize that, and never fall into that trap, the ego trap. The art is always the primary concern, and the art goes where the fuck it wants to go. You don't have any say in that. You know, if you're open, you're going to go all over the place if you follow the muse, if you follow your art. You know, and perhaps the more you try and control where it goes, or you assert your idea onto it, the more stillborn and dead, and it doesn't get off the ground, you know.
absolutely,
This
yeah.
is, yeah, this is a lesson. I mean, in a different way, in my story, I've not, sort of been turned away from the world, but as I turn towards it, I'm realizing, yeah, I've got to let these things go. I've got to, like, get them out there and get them rolling, involve other people, but let them grow, let them be what they want to be, because it's going to be something far bigger than I can imagine. And, you know, surprising things happen, and some of my best creative experiences have been in collaboration with other people, and
Totally.
that wonderful sort of dialogue that goes on, and how, you know, like a conversation, you can't have a conversation like this on your own. It's not going to work. It requires that passing it backwards and forwards, and then someone will say something that just opens up a whole universe of ideas for you that you wouldn't have got to on your own, you know. It's kind of wired into us, I think. We are communal animals by nature.
Seeking the value of other people, you know, that great, that, yeah, like you say, I think to be a good artist, or to be a good, you know, whatever, to accept that you can't, just to seek other people's input, and to make yeah, there's so much value in just in bringing that. Like you say, it's going to make it has potential to make that project so much greater and so much bigger than it could have been otherwise, you know. And it makes it more sustainable, I feel, you know, bringing other people in and making them, like you say, giving others that creative input, and allowing them to be free in themselves, to do, and giving them space to be themselves in that space. You not only get the benefit of having that input from like another talent, but you've also got this create a sustainable project, you know. It gives people purpose. It gives people like something like a reason to, you know, to keep going with it, you know.
Yeah, well, it's boring if it's just your thing and you're wanting them all to do it your way. Nobody who's creative is going to go near that. They're like, yeah, great. You know, you'll attract the wrong people, basically.
Yeah.
But the other side to it, though, at the same time, there's this exchange. But the other side to it is that you're totally ruthlessly true to your own authentic expression, and you don't compromise on that at all. And you take care of your own side of it, and you make sure that what you're doing is as good as it can be, and that's where you can put the full control and really work hard at. It's this two-way thing. It's almost paradoxical, because you're being that, but you're also being open to the influence of something else and an exchange. But there is a kind of boundary. There's a membrane where you end and they begin, and there's an overlap area where things get shared. But you know, it's having that kind of clear authenticity and expression in yourself as well. It's a dance between the two, really, I think. And maybe, you know, ideally that's kind of, even if you're a solo artist, perhaps the audience should be considered as part of that creative process, and their feedback in some way, or even not the audience but the whole world itself. I mean, for me, you know, all great art is the kind of expression of the divine nature of life, or this kind of incredible miraculous experience that we call life. Whatever this is, it's the sort of expression of that wonder through whatever art form, of the kind of everyday, of just the amazingness of it. So you've always got that relationship as a sort of feedback as well. And yeah, and perhaps that's another trap, is when you start to think you're the source of art, and then you start to kind of give birth to kind of dead things, rather than realizing, oh, the source is actually this whole thing that's coming through me. I'm just a kind of instrument for that. Yeah. That seems to me now like the proper relationship, is that you are just a vessel for this creative energy that seems to move through everything. Yeah,
absolutely. Where does it come from? It's such a, yeah, it's a beautiful realization. So I read Leonard Cohen's biography recently, and he talks a lot about that in there. And actually, you know, having done some of Bryony's work, being our kind of, Bryony being our bridge to one another, doing some of that work was profoundly, you know, I was so gravitated towards her and what she was doing, and yeah, it's just it's all of these things that we've been talking about. It's the bringing together of community. It's and erasing the kind of barrier between audience and performer, and it's also acknowledging that we don't, and just allowing this channel to open and just totally trying to train yourself to get the mind out of the way and just to let that creativity come through you in its purest form. It's fucking mad and so awesome.
Yes, yeah, it's good you bring that up, because I feel like that's the sort of bigger picture that's going on, which is, we've got this, there's a cultural death going on, and all these old ways of creating art and music, and they're no longer relevant because something big is shifting. Everything is shifting. So we're having to, I feel like it's a sort of reintegration. It's like we're getting all of these pieces that were scattered and we're bringing them all back together, these essential parts of what it is to be human and how we live together and how we live in relationship with the earth, the physical earth, but also spirit, or this dimension that's bigger than that, this kind of greater than container that everything else seems to be kind of a part of, or an expression of. It's like anything that's kind of pulling in all these different elements and blending them together, like the workshops that Bryony's doing, that sort of accesses the creative that's in everybody, because everyone has, this idea that our culture has that some people are artists and some people aren't. It's bullshit. Everyone, you're alive, you're a creative being, you're human. It's part of being human. So it's this kind of reintegration of all of that, and connection with something bigger than yourself, and through your body, through your heart, these other dimensions of experience that everybody has access to, that have been neglected and sort of undernourished because we've been culturally so stuck in our heads. And and there's been an emphasis on thinking, and even beyond thinking now into this kind of virtual realm. But all of these things are good. We just need to balance them again, I feel. And I think that there's a massive exploration of that going on, unfolding all around us now. And anyone who is more naturally called to creativity, or the sort of role or life of the artist, is probably feeling it a lot more, because those, it seems to move through those people first. It's the artists. I think Terence McKenna talks a lot about this. It's the artists who are going to find a way through this mess. It's not politicians. It's not, it's not financiers. It's not any of those people. It's not technologists. It's not scientists. It's the artists. It's the culture makers who are going to find the map, or create the map, or lead the way even. Through, and maybe it's the culture maker in everyone that's being called forward right now. The artist in everyone, that part of yourself that's able to just take everything that really is, that you can see right now, and allow it to reform in new and novel ways, without your kind of limitations or expectations or rules, or all the old ways of thinking that you had, that are kind of blocking what's trying to be born here. So yeah.
Absolutely, man. I like to hear nice to hear your ideas on this kind of period that we're in, of kind of this shifting, and there's like so much change going on, and there's so much waking up going on, and it's almost like the kind of artists, we're all kind of the arts and culture are kind of new politicians in a way. It's the new religion. It's like the new kind of, people finding faith in these kind of, and connecting on a spiritual level with art, and seeing themselves in it, and that's profound, and that's big. There's a lot of space there for change. And
well, it's the authenticity, isn't it? It's what we both recognized when we heard that music as kids, that it moved us so greatly, because it was music, but also because it was authentic, it was real. And we were surrounded by unreal things by bullshit, by stories of bullshit, ways of life that are bullshit. You know, you look at politicians, you listen to people in the media, it's bullshit, and you know it is, and you can feel that your animal self just goes, that's bullshit, I don't want anything to do with that. So when you put next to that someone who's just being truthfully themselves in whatever realm that is, it's so profound and so striking as a positive yes, as something you want to be around or involved with. And I feel like that contrast is so great right now. This is kind of an optimistic feeling in me, is that it's so bad now the way we're doing things. It's so paper thin and transparent and bullshit ridden that as soon as something real and good stands up, everyone's going to know it and gravitate towards it. And I feel like it's happening in individuals. I'm doing it in myself right now. I'm just getting rid of anything that isn't me. And I just want to focus my energy on being true, in whatever way that manifests. And I want to give my energy to other people I see around me or in the world, in the greater world. You know, that's where I want to put my attention, on people who are speaking truth, who are being authentic, who are showing up in their vulnerability, in their complexity, and, you know, not giving easy answers, because there aren't any easy answers. You know, I don't know is probably the best thing a politician should be saying right now.
Yeah, man.
Because that's the fucking truth, because nobody knows.
Yeah. Stop just making shit up. Just say you don't know. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like, just,
it's a time of
connect to that.
Right. It really is. We're going to see it. I feel like we're really close to like a big breakthrough with all of that, because everyone's tired of the old.
Yeah,
it's so unconvincing, you know.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
Yes. Cool. Well, maybe that's us.
Yeah, man. But thanks so much, Tim. That was really I feel really inspired, and yeah, I really enjoyed that, man. So nice to talk with someone about this stuff on this level, on this page, you know. Really grateful for you reaching out and asking me to do this. Thanks, man.
Pleasure, real pleasure for me, and so nice and unexpected to get taken back to those formative experiences of my own as well. And
it must be so interesting for you to do this. I think it's such a wonderful idea, man. You must because you don't know where it's going to go, and
what I'm really enjoying right now is just like this, like people I don't know, and seeing who they are and where we go, and finding connection. And I'm more and more feeling like, well, if the other person is willing, because that's all it takes, they just need to be willing to show up and to put something in, and not just to be in their head and like giving their usual pitch, you know, repeating the script, but actually showing up with an openness to kind of seeing where it goes. It's always fascinating for me, always fascinating. So I'm really grateful for anyone who has the courage as well, because I think it takes some courage to show up and be themselves and share a bit of their life. So thank you very much for that.
Well, my pleasure, Tim. Just, thank you for the opportunity, man. I really, like I said, I've loved it. You know, it's just, I find it fascinating that two dudes can get together, having met each other once on like the Zoom sharing evening, essentially not know who the hell they are, and just have a 2-hour chat on about so many things, and it just comes so beautifully and naturally. And I feel like I have the same feeling of being wandering about at a festival, and I just sat down and then I made a friend. You know, it's the same. It's that same kind of feeling, and that the fluidity of that. It's a beautiful thing, man.
Yeah, great, lovely. All right, well, take care.
Take care, Tim, and yeah, I hope to speak to you soon.
Yeah, we'll speak again soon.
Yeah, man, let's be in touch.